Aloy has returned with a murder of new enemies and a flock of old friends for a brand new adventure, squeezing the very last watts of power from the sun-setting PS4 generation whilst harmoniously kickstarting the PS5s. Have Guerrilla reinvented the wheel in Forbidden West? Let's dive in and find out. Excitement levels have been growing ever since the first glimpse of Aloy's next entry was first shown. Check out the complete IGN review to find out if all the hype has paid off. First things first, the most important, well not really, the numbers game. The PS4 tops out at 1920 by 1080, but that is not the whole story, as it now appears to use checkerboarding to hit this level. The result is we can see some half-width counts and even a 900p height, although this may and is likely a breakdown in that reconstruction technique, which is almost impossible to decipher from the outside in. The very point of the techniques, to be honest. The reduction in pixel shading is the big saving here, but I'll talk about IQ shortly. The Pro is really the refined version of the PS4, pretty much as expected, offering the sharper and cleaner IQ as it now renders at an increased 3200 by 1800. A reduction on the previous 3840 by 2160 checkerboard solution from the previous entry. It again relies on checkerboarding method to resolve its final sharp and clean output, meaning the improvement over the 1.8 teraflop PS4 is substantial and resolves many of the issues I will cover shortly regarding the PS4 output. Finally, the big boy in the PS5 clearly uses its phenomenal power hike to offer two options. A full native 4K, which is clearly the sharpest and most visually impressive of all the modes, via its 30 FPS resolution mode, resolving any IQ issues with a sharp and stable image that is now genuinely blurring the lines between offline and real-time rendering. There are still a few sharp and shimmery edges on specular highlights, but again that's the choice of a very light TAA solution used by the team. If you want 60 FPS though, as PS5 players are now used to after that Zero Dawn backwards compatibility patch last year, then the performance mode has you covered. The cost is now reverting to a similar Pro-Light checkerboard output, still at 1800p, but now resolved via this temporary accumulated method. The drop in pixel clarity is very minor, but it can be seen in high frequency areas of the screen under movement, specifically within textures, thin foliage, reflective surfaces and post effects such as screen space reflections. Although the doubling of the frame rates heavily mitigates this, within a minute or so the resolution delta fades away, largely helped by the temporal increase in pixels and fill rate within the same time. The game does use a minimal TAA solution that reconstructs a single previous frame back into a higher output with a mixture of FXAA on top. It is not egregious with its coverage, so they get no ghosting trail or image blur that is largely the Achilles heel of such AA methods. The solution is similar to Zero Dawn, which again used FXAA and TAA, which means on PS4 it can leave a shimmering and unstable image, often with the density of foliage and thin specular edges being key areas that stand out. Due to that lower base resolution and shading as mentioned, and the fuller minutiae of screen elements presents a visually striking but unstable IQ at times even on a 1080p screen. In reality though, the sacrifices to image quality are minor compared to the additions. Volumetrics are much better, more stable, and also receive projected shadows from characters. Post effects more abundant with much better quality screen space reflections, although these seem to be mixed with dynamic projected cube maps in outdoor sections to balance the GPU load. Possibly the biggest though is the sheer increase in flora and fauna. The density across the worlds now is much higher than the previous entry. Here though, they have flourished the world with a vast amount. Even on the PS4, the interaction levels have been increased, with the team clearly working on aspects myself and others highlighted in the first title. Long reeds of grass still collide and sway as you walk through, but almost all other bushes and even grassy areas now push aside and move when Aloy runs, rolls or crawls through, including lily pads on water.
Good hit.
All of this brings it more in line with the high settings on PC and is a testament to both the benefit of that GPU resource allocation shift and the sheer technical ingenuity of Guerrilla, a team that has long since been at the sharp end of game technology and innovation. The Pro resolves most of the IQ offense crimes you may have, whilst enhancing all of the rich, flamboyant and almost dreamlike world that has been crafted here. The substantial uplift in resolution on the Pro really helps the image quality, as does the enhancements to other effects and screen effects, including an enhancement on LOD, which is pushed further out than the PS4. But the PS5 just ramps all of this up across the visual menu. Sharper and more detailed textures, cleaner image quality, faster frame rates, denser fauna, more effects and detail with higher polygonal objects. Further LOD, which you can see here, is significantly improved. Everything looks a lot denser and fuller, and therefore it reduces that pop-in as you're walking through the world. You still get some pop-in of slight screen space ambient occlusion and screen space shadows, which the title uses, but overall it's much better on the PS5, as are shadows themselves, sporting a much better soft feathered penumbra shadow and a further cascade shadow map. All of these visual settings are identical between resolution and performance mode, with the only difference being the fact that one runs at 60 and has a slightly lower resolution. Another welcome addition to the PS5 version is that hero lighting, which now runs in gameplay and cinematics, which it doesn't run on the PS4 and the Pro. It enhances both the character model of Aloy and the material quality throughout, and it blurs that line much closer between those real-time cinematics and gameplay. It makes a significant leap in quality, certainly moving the character from a gamey look you see on PS4 and Pro to this much improved look on the PS5. It does have some small issues causing Aloy to glow in darker areas, which doesn't affect other characters, but generally it is a welcome improvement to visual fidelity. This is a cross-generational title at heart, but visually they have improved significant areas, but it's a struggle to say which one you're most impressed with, the enhancements the PS5 offers over the other versions, or just how good that base PS4 version still is. Obviously there's a huge amount I want to discuss on this title, but I need to keep things moving forward, and the next area is performance. The PS4, as of patch 1.03, which might even be newer by the time the game launches, it's equally, if not better than Zero Dawn. Some minor skips and dips happen from the opening 3 hours of the title, but overall it's pretty mild. With such a large game with so many dynamic areas though, it may have some worse areas, but from my playthrough I was more than impressed in both the quality and fidelity of the PS4 version. The Pro is largely the same story, but it can present some minor skips and stutters into 16, 33 and even 66 milliseconds. These are, though, from these tested heavier sections, very brief and imperceptible to almost all players. The root cause here is not easy to pick up. It is obviously related to things like GPU, dense alpha overdraw and particle effects, but it could equally be just memory allocation issues which is causing these mild stutters. In general play though, I never really felt anything bad at all, aside one element of the gameplay which I won't touch on here for spoilers that can have some small performance hiccups, but overall the Pro version is impressive as well. PS5's dual modes offer obviously two options, and the 60 FPS and 30 FPS both do a great job in delivering on that target. Again, picking some of the most stressful sections I could find in the opening few hours that are not full of spoilers, it holds 30 FPS pretty much as good as the PS4 Pro does with all the enhancements I mentioned. It can generally skip again into that 50 millisecond and 16 millisecond spikes up and down, and it can drop as low as the high 40s in these heavy combat sections, but general play, it is as smooth as silk in that 60 FPS mode. And the 30 FPS one never stutters and judders heavily, aside those sections I mentioned related to travel. That's all I'm going to hint at. Outside of this though, the 60 FPS mode is the one you would most likely choose, because the deficit to the resolution, although obvious when you flick over, very quickly becomes not an issue, and aside from heavy stressful battle sections, it generally holds 60 FPS to never feel anything but smooth and responsive, and it's certainly the one that I would recommend. So with all these highs, there is one area that is slightly disappointing loading. Still very fast at half the time of the Pro, but don't expect rapid single-digit loading times, and respawns can take a few seconds. Still impressive considering the size and scale of the game. Forbidden West had a huge level of expectation levelled at it, and Guerrilla have not let anyone down, least of all PS4 owners. And if you like these deep dives into game technology and performance, then keep it IGN, and we'll see you on the next one.